Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast of Tax People Are Not Boring. I'm Matt Berry, here with me, Andrew Bohnet, and our special guest, Sarah Kaper. Sarah, thank you very much.
Kaper or Kaper?
It's Kaper.
Oh, I did get it right then. That's good.
Yeah.
Did you ever get people, having problems with that name at all?
Yeah, I get people having problems with it all the time, and it's probably a little bit to do with my pronunciation, which is probably not the correct Dutch pronunciation. But I also sometimes have a bit problems when I'm typing it. If I use an autocorrect in English on a Dutch form, it can come up as hijacker.
So
No, that's not what you want, is it?
no, it's not especially if you're not.
It's not what you want when you're applying for, a visa or on a travel form. It's not really a good look. So just use the English version of the form.
Right, noted.
So Matt, I have a really important question that I need you to ask Sarah.
I do, and be careful how you answer this one. Are tax people boring, Sarah?
I haven't met any boring tax people.
You must have met at least
They
one
exist.
boring tax person. No, I think it's. I think we work in this world, and I think a lot of people don't understand how diverse, how engaging the role is, and you can't be boring to be in tax.
Absolutely not.
So Sarah, can you speak any other languages? You obviously moved around a little bit. You're living in the Netherlands now.
Yeah, I can speak Dutch. Quite basically, though, if I'm speaking with another Dutch person, they will remark on how poor my Dutch is. But I feel like if I'm speaking with another foreigner, I think I sound pretty good. And I speak a bit of Norwegian as well.
Wow, Norwegian as well. And obviously English.
Well, English. Although I've lost my Australian accent. A taxi driver back in Sydney told me a couple of years ago, I don't sound Australian anymore.
No, you do.
Oh,
you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that I do. I have been working on it, but because Australians go up at the end of your sentence, it makes people feel like you're constantly asking a question, and that's really disconcerting. So I've tried to tone that down.
That's really true.
So, Sarah, if you had to choose one theme song that would sort of represent your life, what would it be and why?
What's literally coming into my head right now is Staying Alive.
Staying Alive, yeah, I love it.
That's what I'm hearing as soon as you said what theme song. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Is that due to work, due to kids, or due to having to learn Dutch?
I think maybe it's more the kids thing, actually. And I'm a bit of Staying Alive is the Bee Gees. So I'm somewhat of a Bee Gees fan. I think maybe it's my upbringing.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I think the piece of advice that sticks in my head was a piece of work advice. And someone very senior came into the office and said to me, once you pull a rabbit out of a hat, people are going to expect you to keep on pulling rabbits out of the hat.
Can't be a member of PETA then if you're going to be doing that, are you?
I have a feeling it wasn't a literal comment, but it had been a bit of a win at work, a tax win as it happens. And I think it was be prepared that, from time to time, I think you can find a tax saving, but that can quickly turn into people thinking that there's always something to be found. So just be careful, I think, how you're bringing that to people, and make sure that they don't expect all the time that you're suddenly going to be able to come up with all these tax wins, because you're not going to be able to.
No, unless, of course, you are, doing something to allow you to get those wins in the first place. So,
I can't imagine being in that position, but it's really stuck with me. I can remember the conversation right now, and it's from 20 years ago. And I thought then, that's quite interesting. And I think it's a comment about setting expectations.
But do you know, just staying on that topic a little bit, do you think, that's potentially, it's almost like a negative thing to say, because they're almost saying either you always have to be pulling rabbits out of the hat, or don't bother, because, if you can't keep doing it, then, it's, what's the point almost? And I think my wife always says to me that one of her bosses said, don't expect other people to work as hard or to your level. Not everyone's the same. And I think it's almost sort of like a similar type of comment. It's like, if you do things really well, other people will always expect you to do things really well, but also you then have to, you can't expect everybody else to do the same.
Yep. I think basically that was really what the comment was I think I hadn't been in the role that long. And in another way, it was maybe a friendly warning. If you're doing this now, then be prepared to keep this up long term. Can you manage that? And I thought, yes, I can. I can keep on doing this. But I think, as we all know, how many wins can you have? And this had been a win that essentially clawed some tax back. So essentially, it was a cash win. Now, there's really going to be a limit to how many cash wins that you can have. So, but it certainly made me think, and it made me think about how do you present wins? How do you describe them when you have them? And what expectations are you setting with the business? Is this, like you feel like, oh, I'm doing a good job here, but maybe you're doing a bit of a disservice. It was quite a tricky one.
So Sarah, if you had a free year to do anything, you could go traveling, or you could continue working in tax, as it's such an illustrious industry. How would you spend it?
Away from the kids.
I hadn't given the kids too much thought in that one, but I had given some thought to, if I had a year off, I've really gotten into listening to true crime podcasts.
Oh, wow.
So basically doing some sort of deep dive into a true crime, and then bringing it out as a podcast. That would be super fun. And no, I have no experience in one true crime to podcasting or anything like that. But I think that it could be really, really fun. Oh, that sounds quite bad, true crime and fun, but maybe entertaining, if you know what I mean. And hopefully sort of the person is in jail and isn't going to come after me. Or maybe something, maybe like a scam or something, sort of investigating, bit of a deep dive. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound too far from, what we do in this industry is problem solve, right? It's it's finding those areas and, trying to make a positive impact and solving problems where we can. So it totally makes sense from my perspective. I mean, true crime probably not for me, but each to their own.
My wife is into that as well. She loves listening to all of the whether it's a TV series or a podcast. But you said you don't have any podcast experience. Well, after this one, you will do. So there we go.
I'll be all set. But you're right. It is actually, now I think about it, it is really similar, because it's about asking why.
Really important question here for you, Sarah. Who would win out of a fight between Harry Potter and Darth Vader?
I'm going to go with Darth Vader.
Why?
Because he seems scarier.
It's true. I mean, the way I'd see it is that initially Darth Vader would be winning because Harry Potter would be doing all these silly little things that don't have any impact. And then at the end, you just cast one spell that just destroys everything. And you're like, why didn't you just do that at the beginning? So I think Darth Vader would get in there first of all.
But is that a fair fight, though, if you're making magic?
Is any fight a fair fight?
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you weren't in tax, what do you think you would be?
True crime.
Well, obviously, yeah.
If I wasn't in tax, I think I had this. I every sort of once in a while, and it's on a cycle of a number of years, I have this feeling that I should go back, because I started a law degree and didn't. I started with constitutional law, which is where you start, and it was a little dry for my liking. And then I ended up doing a business degree instead. And on a regular basis, I go back and think, you know what, maybe I should go and do a law degree, and maybe there's something for me in law. And then I have visions of myself, maybe in court, arguing about something. So I think that's potentially where I could be.
Okay, Sarah, what's your tax ick?
I think the one that comes to mind first for me And I suspect that dentists experience this, and potentially
Bad breath, yeah.
religious practitioners. I think you can see where I'm headed with this one, is people only come to you when there's a problem.
Yeah.
And I think over time it does get a little makes you feel like you're not very wanted. And then I think the second part of that is that they then expect that you can fix it, and some things can't be fixed afterwards. I mean, once a contract is signed, it's a little bit too late to change it. So I think, so one is that, when you make that initial contact is often too late. And the second is the expectation level of what you can manage to do after something has happened is relatively high. And I think then there's a disappointment, which when you're a tax professional, you feel like this could all have been avoided. So it feels like an opportunity missed. And then you just hope for the future that, next time we're going to talk earlier, hopefully.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just to follow up on that, because as you were saying, you constantly experience going, oh, why are you doing it this way? What are you doing? Has there been any particular highlight where you've, it's been quite a revelationary experience for you where, actually it's turned into a great learning opportunity, for example?
I think, there's certainly been times where you've realized that people's understanding is different to what you thought. And that sounds a little bit waffly, but what I mean is people believe that their contract actually means one thing. And then you're in a conversation and you realize, oh, you think that this is covered, but I know that your standard contract doesn't actually cover what you think it covers. So then you realize that the shared understanding is quite different, and that a lot of the time you should always cover the basics, even though it feels a little bit boring, and that you should probably always start from the beginning and make sure that you're all on the same page about what means what.
I think that's really good advice, actually, with tax. I can put my hand up and, in the same situation, I'm talking at a level that I think everybody understands.
Yeah.
And people will be nodding along, but actually they don't really understand it, or they don't understand it in the same context that you're sort of referring to it. And you have to then sometimes just go back to the sort of basics and then bring people in. So you take them on that journey almost to get them to the point where everybody's then, yeah, okay, now I see what we're talking about here, rather than, yeah, I know this, it's fine, whatever. So that's actually, I think, really important.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we start in the middle instead of starting at the beginning and confirming and then going from there. And so I think the older I get, and I think it happens very often with my children, and I realize, hold on, let's take a step back. What are we talking about again? Oh, right, you're talking about something completely different. And the same happens all the time in work situations where you're not on the same page at all. And a couple of minutes could have made a huge difference to outcomes.
Absolutely. What's been the biggest change in tax technology since you've started in the tax world?
Well, I'm giving away my age a bit, but and this is very simple.
You already did that by saying BB.
When I started, we weren't allowed to do our own typing.
Wow.
So there was a pool of typists, and so it was not normal that you would actually type your own thing up. There were some specialists, and you were not supposed to be doing typing. And if you did, then look out if the partner came and saw you. So obviously that has changed, and everyone has typing skills now, for example. So you didn't have, that big time gap where you were waiting for your marked up letter to come back to you. So certainly that has changed. And I think, basically so much has changed now. I started out on Lotus Notes. Now where, and I remember Gmail coming in, not for work, but I remember sort of, everyone's using Gmail now. I can remember that. I can remember saying, someone says that their sister says it's good. Anyway, everything has changed now. But yeah, I still see a lot of Excel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just different versions.
Yeah.
That's a constant.
Mm.
I was working in a bank in around, I think it was around about 2015, and they were still using Excel version 97, I think it was. So, yeah,
Wow.
because of that particular tool, that particular way they were doing things, they just couldn't. So it is a bit crazy. I mean, interesting though, with the typing, did you have to record what you wanted to say and then they would type it up, or did they just magically know? So were they like basically AI but in human form?
It was yeah, essentially, that's a really good question, because I'm trying to think, how did they get it in the first place? And I think maybe that you were because the more senior people, because this is Big Four, the more senior people did the walking around the office talking to the dictaphone and left the dictaphone in the secretary's inbox, but they had a secretary and there was a typist pool, so there were quite a few people doing typing. I think basically we were allowed to sort of get started, but then you couldn't make the amendments. And you would then sort of handwrite it and mark it, and you would put it in the in tray. And then depending on your sort of level of influence would depend on when your document was coming in the out tray. So you would just want to sort of subtly cruise by to see whether or not yours was in the out tray, but you didn't want to sort of overplay and be rifling through, because that could slow the whole process down.
I think it's crazy, isn't it, how things were done and how they're done now, because ultimately everything is sort of sped up. Obviously the use of AI, even, doing all this, is literally writing, taking what you're sort of saying and summarizing it. So it's gone to a complete sort of different level. So I think we're just going to see more of that.
Do you think there's a buzzword in the tax tech world that you think is overhyped?
I won't say buzzword, but a bit of a management buzzword that I heard quite a lot, and now find myself saying it, is like, it's a journey. And I think everyone talks about it now and they say it's a journey. And I couldn't really get on board with that one, because I would think, oh yeah, it's journey. What are we talking about? And I think the more that I think about it, the more that I realize it is the right word, and it is all a journey, and it's not a matter of switching on and then suddenly the next day we're different. It is a matter of gradually accepting things and then saying, oh, there are these advantages to doing it this way. And that maybe that was also maturing of my thoughts, that this journey, it's not a buzzword. Like it's a real thing. Like a lot of things are a journey to get from, okay, this is the way that we were doing it, this is the way that we want to be doing it. It is a journey to get there, and people and organizations are going to go at very different paces, and even different people within the same organization. You're going to get some people that are really quickly, sign me up, let's do things differently, and others that are going to have, shall we say, a longer journey.
And with most things, if you just try and treat it as a project, there's a start and an end. And quite often that end becomes the focal point, and you're just, in effect, trying to complete the project without actually trying to achieve what you set out to do. And so that's why I think the journey part is really important, because but only if you understand it. Like you say, you need to see it in the context. Go, that's why, rather than, well, just as buzzword. What is it? Because, having that context, you then go, okay, I understand now that, okay, we do need to do this in a certain time period. There is a project, but we don't necessarily have to finish this part if it means by finishing it in this project time, it's going to cause problems. Let's postpone it or change the project to actually have a better outcome if there are changes that have taken place. So
absolutely. It's responsive, because the sound of the word journey sounds like it's responding to what's happening, what's the feedback along the way. Whereas project sounds like a budget, a time frame, and finish.
You've been doing tax for quite some time. Can you tell us how you got into tax, what your journey was?
Yeah, sure. I think, like many of your guests, I fell into tax. I think it wasn't a childhood dream, per se. I think I had not thought that much about what I was going to do. I started off doing an economics law degree, and then changed my mind and had some time off, And then realized that actually I really wanted to work. I really wanted to be in the workforce. And so someone suggested, well, why don't you go for a cadetship at one of the big four firms? And I got an interview, and you were able to choose which area you wanted to go into. Well, you were able to tick on a form anyway. And none of my ticks worked out because I had visions of myself going into liquidations and that I would be busy sort of hauling chairs out of offices and things like that. But it turned out that they only accepted graduates in the liquidations area. And I had an interview in tax, and this was in mining and energy, corporate taxation. And I remember being in the interview and thinking, this sounds really exciting. Honestly, I really thought, wow, this sounds great. Yep, this is what I want to do. They offered me a job. So yeah, great, off we go. And it was quite exciting, really varied. And so yeah, and I did university part-time and worked full-time. So it was quite the introduction into corporate taxation, learning about clients, obviously just in the resources industry, but it was quite fun.
So to what extent does culture influence the tax process and, you know, an individual's perception of taxation?
Yeah, I think so for me, hearing that question, two things come to mind. One is the corporate culture in terms of, you know, are we asking the right people to get involved and do we value their opinion? And how happy are people to essentially sort of cross-pollinate? And are we making those things happen? Do we have a collaborative culture? Because I think when you're just ticking boxes and, you know, is someone turning up at a meeting is a very different feeling to, okay, we need to make sure that you're on board. We need to make sure that we're all working together because we're all headed, hopefully, in the same direction. Then when you work somewhere else where the culture is a little bit, well, let's just work on this and we'll see what happens. And if we're made to talk to them being the tax people later on, then we will if we have to. But if we don't have to, then woohoo, let's just keep going. So, you know, it really depends, I think, on really the leadership. And I think how you're perceived in the business and whether or not you're perceived as someone that can add value, or are you perceived as someone that's going to, and one of the things is, if you're perceived as someone or your department is perceived as something that's going to slow things down, then no one's going to want to get you involved. So that's one of the things about making sure that you're seen as responsive, making sure you're seen as someone pragmatic, and really making sure that you understand what are the business goals, what are people actually trying to do. And I think when people see that you're an ally, you're on their side, you're really there to make things happen with them, then of course you get to get involved and you get to work together, as opposed to you get to pick up the pieces later on.
How much do you think there's like, you know, tax obviously want the business to speak to you, right? Because you want to be able to make sure things have been done in the right way. You want to get the knowledge as well. But also a lot of people, I think you've alluded to the fact that they don't want to speak to tax because either they potentially may be a bit scared of what the answer may be. They may not want to sound stupid. They may think, you know, you're unapproachable. You've created a company called Tax Canary. How much was Tax Canary influenced about this, you know, sort of requirement to be able to give this knowledge to the teams to allow them to be able to move forward and be more open in finding out information and making sort of tax more approachable?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I have seen is this reticence to want to get involved with tax. And I completely understand it because I think tax as a concept is something that is always seen as a little bit frightening and a little bit scary. And I think even personally, honestly, if you get a call right now from HMRC and they're saying, you know what, we've decided to look at your personal tax return, whether or not you've done everything perfectly, it doesn't really matter. You get that feeling of fear. And so I can completely understand that. And so I think if you combine that with thinking, well, the other experiences I've had, they've been quite slow, or they've said something that I don't like, then that sort of all adds up together to not wanting to have anything to do with you. So what can we do about that? And I think then Tax Canary was born out of, okay, how can we make sure that essentially you have an early warning system? Because some of the time you don't need intricate tax advice. You know what I mean? Sometimes you literally just need a number. Oh, that's going to be 10% withholding tax over the transaction. Oh, is it? Oh, okay, well, I can go back and change my price, or I will take that into account. Or even from the point of view of, oh, now I understand that my customer is going to maybe have to pay VAT on top of what they're paying me as well. So when I thought that I was charging X, he's actually going to be paying X plus 20%. So even just building that picture, it's really helpful. And you don't always need a tax professional to do that for you. So I think for me, it was like, how can we create something that can amplify the reach of a tax professional whilst filtering the workload to only the tax riskiest projects? So for the tax manager in-house, this is to make life easier, but it's also so you can be proactive. And so if you're seen as one of those departments that's getting out there and that's, making life easier for other people by providing them with something, so to a certain extent they can do it themselves and only get you involved if you really need to be, then you're really seen as proactive. Then you're really being a business partner. That was my rationale for coming up with Tax Canary.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at AI and then they say, oh, I can do everything. But actually, you should never let AI make the final decision. You should only use it to do the research, to go to the point. There should always be that human element, that human overlay. And I think, something that Tax Canary, allows is for people to do that, find that information. And like you say, oh, if there was 10% withholding tax, I knew about that anyway, that's fine. Or I now need to go and speak to tax because actually I've done that initial research and I do now need to speak to tax because I didn't even consider this. And I think if you had a situation where everybody spoke to tax all the time, then you're wasting your time. And I think I heard recently that the Spanish tax authorities reduced the number of calls to the tax authority by 90% by creating a chatbot to answer all of the basic questions. So therefore, as you say, the real questions that come through are therefore you can apply more time, better quality answers, from humans being able to answer those questions rather than having short answers because they're overwhelmed and therefore providing a poorer service. So I think there's a lot of value in this.
Yeah, I think it's really, what I would say is for a tax manager, it really allows you to target your time to what you should be spending time on. And one of the things that I experienced together with some colleagues was a lot of the time you're answering, a bit like the Spanish tax authority, the same questions over and over. And of course, it's different people in the business. So you need to be answering those same questions over and over. But if, when that's your job and it's day in, day out, it's not so inspiring. So how can you manage that? And one of the ways you can do it is to try and educate, but I think that can have limited success. And another way is to have information that maybe you put on an internal site where you sort of go, well, you can check this yourself, or these are common scenarios that I see. That's another way to handle it. But it would also be nice, and I think most tax people are fairly into control frameworks, the idea that everyone has run sort of a tax screening or done a tax risk assessment on a project. That's a fairly satisfying feeling when you're looking at tax risks. I think that then you can feel like, okay, I think everything's covered, and then I can pinpoint that these are the ones that I really need to spend time on, and hopefully that way we're going to be able to manage the risk better. So I've got more oversight that tax risks are actually being addressed, and the business has the bonus that this can be done really simply. And the added bonus that they don't necessarily have to talk to a tax manager to get it done. So I see that as a win-win for everyone.
I think these days, the awareness of the emerging technologies within the tax industry, right? We're seeing more and more products being available. There's more awareness to tax departments of the tools that are out there. So I just wanted to know what is it that sets Tax Canary apart? Like what makes it different within this industry?
Well, I think at the moment that I would say most tax solutions, particularly in direct tax or tax research, are focused on tax professionals. So they're focused on, okay, how do I help a tax professional with up-to-date information? This is the latest agreement, the latest ruling, the latest tax case that's going to influence how something is treated. And obviously there's some huge things happening in tax, really, and certainly for multinationals and EU directives and all sorts of there is so much to keep track of. And I think what I am really interested in is the intersection of, if you've got a sales manager or an engineering manager or someone that's out there trying to license IP or sell their services and they're at the front line, how can we support them? And then I think, how do we do that? And then I see, well, there's a bit of a gap there, isn't it? Because we either do that by having an in-house tax manager, and maybe they have set up a matrix that someone can look up, for example. That's one way to solve it. And maybe in a tendering or CRM system, they've set it up with some gates. So depending on a level, then it could go to a tax review, just like it might go to a legal review. So it gets flagged depending on, say, a country or on the revenue that it could generate. So there's all sorts of indicators that you can use. But then, yeah, the question is, then that's essentially making a bottleneck in the tax department, because do they need to look at everything? And I think so I really thought, wow, we have all these things for tax professionals. We have lots of tax compliance software. There's all sorts of things, but there's nothing that really speaks directly to the people that are the end users of some of this information, that aren't tax professionals, that are a professional in something else. So whatever they're a professional in. And so to me, I thought, yeah, they're the people that I'm quite interested in a sense, in like, how do we make it so their life is a little bit easier, but as a tax manager, then they're still covered. And so, yeah, I think that was really a gap that I noticed, and felt like, maybe it's time to do something about this. The simpler you make things, I think the more likely people are to be compliant. And I would say in general, people do want to do the right thing, and we just need to help them do the right thing.
I completely agree. And I remember when you first told me the concept behind Tax Canary, I was like, yeah, that's genius. Because, you look at tax and you have a tax department, and on one side, right, they're legally responsible for finding data they have no control over. So you have all of the data, you have all of the sort of the processes that actually go into the data that goes into the tax return. And whilst the tax department, in effect, don't own any of that data, and they then have to rely on everybody else, you also then have the other side where, as you say, you have a salesperson that probably isn't even considering tax, but creating a contract in a certain way, wording it, even the description on an invoice line can have an impact around the tax. But no one is, like I said, that no one's, if you were asking someone to then Google or to go onto AI to find that information, they wouldn't do it because they probably wouldn't even know where to start. And a lot of the tools, as you've mentioned, they're more about saying, okay, well, if we load all of the legislation from all of the countries, chuck it into a big database, you can search across it. But you need to be able to interpret that. You need to have a tax background. So by creating something that is basically like tax for dummies within the within the business that they can use, and it answers the questions in a way that doesn't go too technical. It's almost like an early warning system to allow people to go, I need to take this further, or that's the information I needed. I think it's genius. I think it's brilliant, and I really hope that that Tax Canary is really successful, because I think when we look at the different companies that are being created, there's a lot of money being invested into tax technology at the moment. But most of these companies just seem to be putting money into doing the same thing, just differently. They're not actually innovating or changing and looking at the problem. It's just, let's build an e-invoicing solution, let's build another compliance tool. And actually, it takes people like yourself that look at it from a different point and say, that's the actual problem. That's the real problem there. It's not necessarily the issues that are on, the fact you can't create an e-invoice. Well, the real issue is because actually they created the contract wrong. And so that's how far back we need to go. So I think it's a brilliant idea, and I really do hope, you have great success with it.
Thank you.
So where, a few years back, there was no such thing as a tax technologist, right? Now it's common. Maybe we're going to see tax psychologists, right? Things like that, of other areas where you will get specialist teams to help with that transformation. And it isn't just seen as tax, it's also seen as how we enhance and transform the rest of the business. Because you have a really good tax solution, determination, compliance reporting, it provides a really good backbone for the business. Because if someone locally tries to enter something in the wrong way and they get the wrong tax, well, that's because they've entered it in the wrong way. That's a flag. That hasn't anything to do with the tax. It's just the fact that you have logic and rules in place has actually identified that someone is entering data in the wrong way. So there's so many other benefits and advantages that you can actually get by having a very well designed, structured tax solution, department, processes. And if they are embedded, if you have a good tax control framework, I think the benefits to it, any company, would be very, very clear to see.
Well, I think, picking up on what you're saying, I'm sure it was, at least a couple of years ago, seeing a graph about, going through the decades and saying, well, where was the technology that businesses were using or the industry was using in comparison to what insights did the tax authorities have? And it used to be that, the insights from the tax authorities were later, and they were so late. So essentially you had time to recharacterize things. You kind of had a bit of time to say, well, that didn't need to go there. We put that here, or, oh, gee, we've coded that incorrectly. And you had time. And essentially, I think the fact that you have time, like, I'm one myself, then you put it off. You put it off to the last minute. So essentially you had time to recharacterize things, and you don't have the time now, which is exactly what you're saying. And pretty much every tax authority is hoping that they're going to get to the point where they are getting real time. And then the question mark is, okay, how is industry going to deal with that? And then when you get to the point where they're looking to audit you based on, a system-based audit, for example, are you set up in the way that you should be set up to make sure that everything works? Okay, your system is fine, then you're fine, which is not what used to happen, which is you look at the numbers and you trace them all through and you try and figure it out. So I think, technology is enabling tax authorities to move forward super, super fast. They've got more information than ever. And how is industry responding? And the best way to do it is to get it right at the very beginning, like what you're talking about. So the first time that transaction hits any system, it's right. And it doesn't need to be changed. And, you have that there, it's in the system. I think, one of the things that we didn't talk about that I see coming in the future is potentially blockchain being introduced by tax authorities. And so there will be no recharacterization. It will be, you had to know what you were doing the first time round. So it's a super exciting time, I think, to be working in tax.
Well, Sarah, it's been amazing having you on this podcast. I think I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. I think again, it's a different topic that we've looked into. I think the concept for Tax Canary is brilliant. I think it's something that is one of those steps to bring tax into to the rest of the business, so it's much more accessible. So I look forward to following Tax Canary and the journey, not the project, the journey that Tax Canary will have. I think I'll end with a question. The last question is, what's going to be your biggest challenge in the next 3 years?
My biggest challenge in the next 3 years is to maybe open up people's thinking that it can be different, that being an in-house tax professional can be different, and that it's not about the sort of, I don't think it's anything to be scared of. I think it's about amplifying the in-house tax professional's role and enhancing the role and making sure that you introduce all the things that you can to cement how important you are in your business, really. And I'm looking forward to do that. And I think it will be a bit of a mindset change. And for tax people, sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge. But I think we're ready for it. So I think it's time for things to change.
Just like buying coffee from your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was hesitant. I can tell you, I was thinking, I'm not sure that this is really a good idea. But I'm buying plenty of coffees on my phone, but I don't use the facial recognition. I'm not on board with that yet.
Yeah, when I do that, the phone just shakes and doesn't do anything. Actually, it's interesting. Talk about the money. My son did some work for me, did some mowing the lawns and tidying up, and I went to give him some cash. He was like, "I don't use cash, Dad." How times have changed. So I was like, "Ask your mother then. She's got your bank details." With that, Sarah, fantastic. All the best, and I look forward to speaking and seeing you soon. Cheers.
Really great speaking
Thanks
to
a
you.
lot for having me today, and it was really enjoyable.